I'm going to explain phylogenetic trees. Here, I have depicted an actual tree. The root system of the tree represents common ancestral lineage of all other organisms depicted in the tree. As we begin to move up the trunk of the tree, time progresses, and this continuous segment of the tree without any branching represents anagenesis, which is the evolution of an organism over time. Once we start seeing branching of the tree, this represents the splitting of one lineage into two, resulting in greater genetic variation. This process is known as cladogenesis. At each point of cladogenesis, we see an internal node, which represents the most common ancestor, recent common ancestor of all organisms on the ensuing branches. For example, the organism on the internal node, labeled here, represents a common ancestor for organisms A, B, C, and D. OTUs are units derived from differences in DNA sequences of organisms on the tree. Finally, we can see here that the lowest branch on the tree appears to have separated from the trunk before all other branches. This is analogous to an outgroup, which is an OTU that diverged earlier than all other OTUs on the tree. This outgroup, labeled as organism X, differs from all other organisms in that the organisms share a common ancestor that X does not. To sum this all up, the tree depicted here is a rooted form of a phylogenetic tree, which is a type of phylogenetic tree that helps us determine the distance between OTUs as well as the temporal order of divergence throughout evolution. Now to my example. I have used screwdriver heads. The first cladogenesis event can be seen at the blue internal node I have shown here. This divergence leads to two distinct groups, bits and bit holders, which differ by their function as tools in real life. We can already identify the bit holder as being an outgroup because it diverges before all other OTUs on the tree do. This outgroup lacks the same common ancestor as every other organism on this tree, and is thus the most genetically different. Since there is no branching seen, the bit holder has gone through anagenesis. The bits can be primarily divided into flatheads and rounded heads. We see that the flatheads and rounded heads have a point of divergence at this internal node shown here in green. This point represents the most recent common ancestor of all flatheads and rounded heads. Going up the flathead branch, we can see that cladogenesis occurs to produce two separate groups, two-faced heads and multi-faced heads. The two-faced heads diverge again into wide and narrow subtypes, while this third head in the flathead group differs since it contains more than two faces. For the rounded heads, we see that cladogenesis occurs where we see branching between pointed heads and non-pointed heads, the internal node of which is denoted by the dark blue circle. Within the pointed head group, we see two heads, one with normal precision tips and one with extra precise tip. Within the normal pointed head group, the non-pointed head group, we see a divergence into either small heads and large heads, with the large head group going through anagenesis and the small head group going through a recent cladogenesis event, diverging the small heads by the level of grooving that they have.